on to the last segment where Meltano will be presenting. So I believe we have Ken Payne here, who will be presenting for Meltano. Yeah, I'll hand it on over.
Awesome, thanks. Let me get my screen share.
Love the well-designed Zoom background too, that still fits you in screen, doesn't obscure any letters.
Yeah, we've got a fantastic director of marketing who is an expert at building our Zoom backgrounds. So yeah, we've actually got
that's one for the resume. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Awesome. Well, first off, thank you very much for letting us have a slot. I'm super excited about what's going on at Great Expectations and talking about how Great Expectations and Meltano work together. Yeah, it's just nice to be here and talking to you all. By way of introduction, my name is Ken. I'm a software engineer here at Meltano. I've been working since August last year on Meltano. Before that, I was a data engineer working in the startup space with a couple of startups based here in the UK. I'm going to be talking a bit today about Meltano and particularly about how Meltano can help you with your Great Expectations deployment. I was super excited by Alex's presentation and the improvements in the profiler. I'm definitely a big fan of the auto-generated expectation suite as a starting point. And it's also super cool to see that Alex is also talking in terms of environments, and we'll see a little bit later on how Meltano is also thinking about environments and how the environments feature in Meltano can be used to help you run tests across multiple remote environments. Before we get into that, I'll talk a little bit about what Meltano actually is. By way of wave, if your camera is on, or reaction emoji, who on the call has come across Meltano before? Let's see how well this works. Oh, cool! I can see a few hands and a few emojis. That's awesome. Well, I'm glad that a few people have heard of us. It seems like the majority, this might be their first look at Meltano, which is also super cool. Oh no. Cool. So what is Meltano then? Well, our vision for Meltano is for it to become the foundation of everybody's ideal data stack. We really see Meltano as bringing DevOps best practices into the data space. Meltano is designed to work across your entire end-to-end data platform. It's entirely open source, and we build on top of other open source projects. So hopefully there are a few. I mean, you'll notice Great Expectations is here under validation, but there are a few other open source logos that hopefully people on the call recognize. DBT and Airflow being quite important ones for where we are at the moment and for people using Meltano at this stage. We want to make it as easy as possible to build and deploy a data stack using modern best practices of version control, including your configuration, continuous integration, continuous deployment, and thorough testing at each stage. So really bringing software best practices into the data space via a tool that allows you to manage your end-to-end data platform in a single place. Before I move on to the demo itself, I will put up the obligatory "we're hiring" slide and ask if anyone has any questions at this stage. I know finding the hand button can be difficult, so I'll give it a second. Hopefully you're all just curious about what Meltano is now and eager to get started with the demo. Cool. In that case, let's get started. So I already have Meltano installed. We actually hit quite an amazing version milestone recently, version 1.100, which is super cool. If I then go and create a Meltano project, I'm going to call it GE Live. So what I've just done, and hopefully everyone can see this, okay? I can make it a bit larger if needed. What we've gone and done is created a Meltano project. The project really is the home of your data stack. I mentioned, and we saw in the previous slide, the various stages of the data lifecycle and the tools that are associated with those stages. In doing Meltano init, you can see we have folders created that roughly correspond to those stages. So that is kind of an indication of the direction that we might be going in with the project. If I then check out the project, what have I actually got in my Meltano project right now? Well, the key part of the project is your meltano.yaml. And right now it looks fairly scant. We have a document version, which for now is just one all of the time. We have a default environment specified, and I'll talk quite a bit more about environments as we go through. And then a set of environments. And that's it right now. Our project is, for all intents and purposes, empty. Well, as this is a Great Expectations community meeting, I think the first thing we should do is add Great Expectations. And I can autocomplete. So what does it actually mean to add something to a Great Expectations project? Well, this will do a couple of things for us. Given that Great Expectations is a pip installable, Meltano itself is built in Python, so we're very, very friendly with Python and pip tools in general. This is creating under the hood for us a virtual env specifically for Great Expectations, installing Great Expectations into that virtual env, and it's also installing a file bundle. File bundles are a special kind of plugin in the Meltano ecosystem that allow you to essentially bundle up a set of files and directories that you would like to install at the same time as a particular plugin. So in this case, the file bundle is a pretty easy one. It's just setting up the base directory for us and giving us a README file. And we'll go and check out that README file in a second. Given that this is doing a full Great Expectations install under the hood, it will take a couple of minutes. But once it's done, we'll go in and have a look at a little bit of the Meltano folder structure, but more onto the README and figuring out how we use Great Expectations inside Meltano. Hopefully this will only take a second. I'm quite happy to take questions at any point in the demo. It is a kind of live technical demo, so things will go wrong, and we have an opportunity to ask questions on the way through. I don't have a script, so you're welcome to interrupt me at any time. Cool. So as I mentioned, we've installed the file bundle called Great Expectations, and we've also installed a utility. Let's check out our Meltano file again and see what has actually changed. Well, so far, not a lot. We have an additional top-level key called plugins and a new utility added called Great Expectations. This will become important, particularly for those who are familiar with Great Expectations and know that just installing Great Expectations isn't always enough. You often want to have SQL Alchemy or one of the named installables for Redshift or Snowflake or Spark or any of the other adapters. So this kind of gives us an opportunity to change that. But why don't we change into the utilities directory and have a look at Great Expectations and the README. Cool. So this is the README that arrived with the file bundle, and it gives you some suggestions and some instructions for working with Meltano and Great Expectations. So we have a description of Great Expectations and links to the Great Expectations docs. We also have some getting started information for adding Great Expectations to your Meltano project and what to do to actually create your first Great Expectations project. So let's do that. Plugins are invoked in Meltano in a couple of ways. So using Meltano invoke to invoke it directly, or as part of a pipeline using Meltano run. So for now, because I just want to run Great Expectations, I only have Great Expectations in my environment. I am going to invoke Great Expectations and I will initialize a project. Straight away, having invoked Great Expectations, we actually get some Meltano log lines that are quite interesting. So you might have noticed in our Meltano.yaml that we have a default environment set as dev. The first log line is just telling us that we're in the dev environment. Right now, we have no configuration inside Meltano. It's an empty Meltano project, so this doesn't mean a lot. But you'll see in a second that actually being environment aware natively gives us an opportunity to when we configure Great Expectations, or more particularly when we configure our data sources and our suites, we have the ability to parameterize the inputs to those assets inside our environments. Cool, so I'm just going to go ahead and initialize a Great Expectations project. Similar to Meltano, top-level Meltano project, we have a directory structure, and our Great Expectations project is installed. It might be useful at this point to have a look at what configuration Great Expectations will actually accept. So if I do Meltano config Great Expectations list, Meltano will tell us what configuration it expects. Right now, all it expects is the GE home environment variable, and we actually set that dynamically to the project root and utilities folder. This can be overridden in your Meltano.yaml, but given that that's where the file bundle sets up the initial folder structure for us, it's a great default, and it allows us to invoke Great Expectations from anywhere inside our Meltano project. You might be asking at this point, that's all well and good, but what we've done is a little bit heavier than just running the pip installable ourselves. Why should we be adding Great Expectations as a utility inside Meltano? Well, I mentioned a couple of times that environments allow us to do cool things with configuration, and really a way to demonstrate some of what Meltano is doing under the hood for us is to run Meltano invoke again. This time, let's set the log level to debug. And we want to invoke Great Expectations, and we'll just print the help. So in addition to creating the virtual environment for us and executing Great Expectations from that virtual environment, allowing us to isolate our Great Expectations installs from the other plugins we have in our Meltano project, Meltano will also take control of the environment variables, or the environment that your Great Expectations plugin runs inside of. And so the cool thing we have in here is the opportunity to access some of the Meltano global variables. So various settings, top level settings from Meltano, including the project root and a few others. But also to start thinking about injecting our own environment variables. To show this off in a little bit more detail, I actually have a project that I created earlier. So rather than going through and adding a data source, hopefully adding data sources and then adding suites is quite a familiar activity to most people in Great Expectations. I will walk you through a project that I created earlier. So this is exactly the same thing, except my Meltano.yaml is a little bit more filled out. So here I have a number of plugins. So I have my Great Expectations utility, as we saw earlier. I also have an extractor and a loader. These are Singer type plugins that allow us to extract data, in this case from tap carbon intensity, and to load it into a destination, in this example Postgres, but this could be any of the major warehouses, a Redshift, a Snowflake, a BigQuery, or something like S3 for file storage. There really are an almost unlimited number of loaders that can be supported. And we have a great SDK for building your own taps and targets if you can't find one of the 300 plus that are currently supported and visible on hub.meltano.com. In this sort of fictitious Meltano project, we're consuming the carbon intensity data, loading it into a Postgres warehouse, and using Great Expectations, we might be interested in running some expectation suites against that data, making sure that as it arrives, after our EL process has done its job, that it is as we expect. To do that, I've set up two environments, a development environment, which is my default, that has one set of credentials. And I've also set up a production environment that's also Postgres, but has a different set of credentials. What I have done to facilitate this on the Great Expectations side is, and if I show you my Great Expectations folder, my Great Expectations.yaml, I've added a data source, and super conveniently, Great Expectations allows seeding configuration directly from environment variables. So this gives us a way to articulate our configuration inside our top-level Meltano project, to reuse that configuration across the taps and targets. So I had to give target Postgres the configuration details of the Postgres database. Those happen to be the same ones I've used for giving Great Expectations access. So I've been able to reuse those, define those credentials once and reuse them across multiple plugins. Using environment variables, I'm enabled to inject those directly into my data source config inside Great Expectations. And this is super cool. It allows us to, for example, well, first let's populate some data. Meltano run, let's do a full refresh. Tap carbon intensity. Target Postgres. So once again, I'm using my default environment because I haven't specified or overridden the environment. This is actually going through and pulling the open source carbon intensity data for the United Kingdom and loading it into my target Postgres. And that's it. That's all it takes in Meltano sense to grab data from an external API and have it loaded into a database. To show you that this actually worked, where have I loaded my, sorry for jumping around. Oh, I haven't got Table Plus open. Bear with me a second. Let's have a look at the actual tables that created. Awesome. So I'm in my development environment. And we can see in the schema tap carbon, we have a set of tables created. These were created automatically by tap Postgres from the, target Postgres from the tap carbon intensity stream names. So I didn't have to define these tables. They were built dynamically based on the stream names in the Singer spec. The table we're probably going to look at most often, as I've created a suite for it, is the region. So we can see that inside. Can
you zoom in just a tiny bit? Sorry to interrupt you.
No, not at all. Table Plus doesn't allow it. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time in Table Plus. I just wanted to show that there is a Postgres database under the hood, and I've been able to load some data into it. So jumping back to our Great Expectations project, in addition to the data source, I've created an expectation suite for tap carbon, which at the moment just has a set of expectations that were actually generated directly by the profiler. I haven't been in and looked at this data. I've generated a set of expectations from the profiler, and they were a really good start. That's one of the things that we really like about Great Expectations, is that building your expectation suite from the ground up can be as easy as running the profiler. As I get to know this data, I would likely spend time adding my own expectations, but to get started, to just have a baseline set of expectations is really, really great. I've also added a checkpoint. These were both added using the Great Expectations CLI. And again, as an example, I won't actually create a whole expectation suite, but if I do Meltano invoke, Great Expectations, Suite new, you can see the process for adding a suite via Meltano is no different to adding a suite through the regular CLI. The only difference being that you are running in a virtual env rather than either the system Python, if that's where you installed Great Expectations, or a virtual env that you are having to manage yourself. So as I said, I'm not actually going to go through and create a new one, but if I went through here following the Great Expectation prompts, I would be shown the notebook and would be able to interact with my data directly from the data source that has the development credentials injected. So before we try and run something in production, let's see if our Great Expectations expectation suite actually works. And what we like to do in our own project, we actually use Great Expectations with Meltano internally. We like to check data at our boundaries with Great Expectations. So as I said, in this example, after we've done our EL, we would typically run a checkpoint to verify that the new data that arrived meets our broad expectations for that data. We use DBT for modeling that data after it arrives. And again, before we hand off between DBT and ABI tool, in our case, Superset, we run another set of expectations to make sure that our presentation data also meets our broad expectations for it. Inside the DBT ecosystem, we also have tests, but we really like to use Great Expectations to sort of bookend our pipelines. So let's do Meltano invoke, Great Expectations, and I've run this before. So this is running a checkpoint still in our development environment, so using the tables that we just fully refreshed. And the expectation suite that I generated with the profiler. And we can see here that this passes. Because checkpoints use POSIX exit flags, the sort of 0 and 1 exit code, if this was part of a pipeline, and we use Airflow for our own internal project, if these expectations weren't met, we'd get a really helpful fail, and that would prompt a data engineer to go in and find out exactly what was going on with the data. So as I said, we really like the Great Expectations can be run in this way, and we use it with our production pipelines to make sure that data is always meeting our expectations. The last thing I'd like to show you is the same thing, but in production. So if I change my environment to prod and invoke the same thing, this will fail. So I went in actually after loading the data and reordered the names of the columns, as one of the checks that I knew was included in the expectation suite is checking for the column order. So I just wanted to show that it does fail, and we can catch both the sort of failures and the successes inside Meltano. I think that is more or less the end of the demo. I can talk a little bit more about the handoff, I guess, and maybe look in more detail at the reusing of environment variables. So I mentioned that inside our Meltano.yaml, we have our 3 plugins. I also mentioned that we reuse the credentials for Postgres, both for the tap and for our Great Expectations. And that's done here in our environments. So as part of our environments definition, we have the ability to override configuration just for that environment. And so in this case, I'm overriding the host, user, password, and database name for Postgres and setting it to dev values in the dev environment, and using host, username, password, and database specifically with tap carbon, as that's the name of my data source in Great Expectations, as a prefix, to pass those environment variables, to pass those secrets from Meltano down into Great Expectations. I do the same, except with prod credentials in our prod environment, just to be able to distinguish between the two sets of credentials. Where these are actually stored right now is a .env file, and we find for our own production use that storing this .env in something like AWS Parameter Store is a good way to secure your secrets and have them accessible by production systems. We have an open issue for supporting a pluggable secrets backend. So rather than storing it in your .env file, or the other option in production currently is inside the system database, you would be able to store these secrets inside a pluggable backend, a backend of your choice. But that's broadly the flow of configuration from a mixture of secrets. Some things are specified hard-coded. So I left the port hard-coded inside my data source, not because it's required, but just to sort of demonstrate that whilst you can specify almost everything in Meltano, there is always a good case to leave quite a lot of your configuration in the source tool where users are going to be familiar with it. If it's static, it doesn't need to be brought up to Meltano space, but then the power of using environments to be able to overload the parameters that matter for the environment that you're working in. If I spent a bit more time on this, I would love to show you other cool things that you could do. We've had quite a lot of talk about injecting parameters environment variables. So if you do have complex expectation suites and you want to run with inputs of various types, specifying the inputs inside your environment. And I'm sure Alex would be able to come up with a few more examples of cool things that you might be able to do with this sort of general ability to inject environment variables based on the environment or the stage that you happen to be in. I think that's everything I had planned. So yeah, I'd like to open it up to questions.
Thanks, Ken. Yeah, we'll give some space for questions. I love how many stories Meltano can unlock for these like combinations of tools. It's really cool. All right, we can always field questions in the Slack as well. If people come up with ones, you know, really late after the Zoom is over. Okay. All right. Well, Ken, thanks so much. Thanks everyone from Meltano for coming. Also, thanks for the awesome sticker that I snagged from you all at Data Council. Got it right on my water bottle. So thanks for that. And just one more quick update for Cloud, and then we'll let you all go. Alina, if you want to go for it, I'll share my screen for you.
Thanks, Kyle. Yeah, so I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Alina, and I'm leading the go-to-market team at Super Connective, and we've been working with some really early design partners from the community for the past couple months, and we've been implementing feedback directly into product development. So if you're interested in getting involved, there's a couple ways. So the first is ask for a cloud workshop invite where we can show you a behind the curtain look into our product roadmap. And then if you want to be a part of our very early private alpha program and go on a data quality journey with us, your feedback will have a direct impact on how we're prioritizing product features and overall design. So reach out to me on Slack or send me a note at alina@superconnective.com.
I also added in the chat the link to the form that you can sign up with as well for Cloud, but either way works. Cool. All right. Well, thanks so much, everyone, for coming to the event. Ooh, got my chat in front of everybody. Yeah, and we'll catch you at the next one. Thanks again, Meltano people, and be on the lookout for that YouTube. We'll be posting that in the next couple days. All right. Have a good week, everyone.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thanks for hosting, Kyle.